what I'd like for you to consider is, in being relational, there is this quality of self and other. And we either are too focused on other when we're in our conflicts and not enough on self, or we're so self-absorbed on self and are not focused on others. So this is a worldview. This is a worldview that when we teach in negotiation, transforms negotiations into outcomes that people did not expect. In addition to this relational worldview, we come back to the teachings that have been very near and dear to our heart, and that is it's not just about skills building, it's about self-awareness. In the moment, that's where we're really interested in self-awareness. We all know we've had amazing retreats, you have awesome meetings, you get incredible information. You go back home, you think about it. If we're lucky, we set aside some time, maybe working with some others about it in a more reflective kind of capacity. But what about the self-awareness in the moment, on the spot, when the conflict comes our way? Let's take a look at that this morning. How do we move toward the uncomfortable and greet the conflict so that we're not avoiding and we're not mishandling? So now let's look at the conflict experience. I'd like for you all, oh, actually, I could share that with you. I forgot to put this in here. That even for those of you who might be, I'm a corporate attorney by background, and so I've tried multiple cases and settled, thank goodness, well more than that. And what I found mirrored also this research. And so I'll share this part that even when a conflict is settled, or there's an agreement, people still report a high rate of dissatisfaction. Wow. Yes, look at all the heads that are nodding. We're like, why is that? Say, well, we got it behind us, right? Or it's no longer on the docket, or it's no longer in our legal department, or we moved that person out, right? Or we got rid of her, and we're thank God he retired. We have that relief. But then we have this experience of dissatisfaction. So in looking at that, both in negotiations and in workplace conflict, what we have found, because we've changed the languaging of how it is that we ask questions. We have found that what people experience that is so dissatisfying to them is no change in the actual interaction itself, the relating, which is where be relational has come from. So I'd like for you all to think about, in your workplaces, the most common situation that occurs is the triangle, right? You know that. Basically, A has a problem with B and goes to C. Oftentimes you're the C, right? We are, as leaders, often the C. We can also easily be the A, and we can also be B. We can be in all three of those positions. So we'll take a look at that too. But before we do, now that we have a little bit of research behind us, you have some of your own experiences on which you can draw, at least generally, let's go to something that's quite specific for you. What I'd like for you to think about right now, and you have someone sitting to your left or to your right that you can partner with for a brief moment. Here is what I'm asking you to do. Consider a conflict that you have right now, or it may have been one that you had yesterday, or last week, or last month, but something that's serious that you have with someone else. We won't talk about those this morning. I wish we could. We don't have enough time. It'll be confidential with the person with whom you speak. I presume you have that confidentiality as chapter chairs when you have your meetings. This will be a one-to-one. And in that one-to-one, I'll give each of you about 3 to 4 minutes. And I'd like for you to answer these two questions. Number one, and I'll show you a slide on this. What was most upsetting to you about that conflict? What was most upsetting or disturbing to you? Secondly, what, if anything, relieved it? And maybe nothing has yet. What, if anything, right, relieved it, gave it some relief? So here it is. What was it that was most or is most upsetting or disturbing to you? And what, if anything, relieved that? So I could share with you that just this past weekend, and I had been traveling, I came home, and I was seeing all my children, everybody was home put in the nest, we were going to have a fabulous Easter, and two of my kids never cleaned up the guest rooms that they have all their music stuff in, and one was homework and so forth, and we had company, and I lost it. I'm like, I've been down with Grandma, down in Florida, with Dutch, for 3 days. We're going to have a wonderful Easter. We have people coming in. I've texted you. You promised. You said. And look at this. I could just feel myself. And as I stepped back, I said, I was just like shaking. I'm like, oh my gosh. And then it upset me because I'm like, it's Easter. And, family's coming in. And I don't want to have this break. That's what was most upsetting to me. Were the consequences of my coming unglued in that moment. And what were the consequences? I wanted to be close to my children. Right? I wanted them to, build our reconnection again that I had broken. So that's one example at home. I give you an example at the office, just since I have been here in New Orleans. I have a mediation with stakeholders in different states. It has taken months to set up. It is to be happening on Monday and Tuesday, the 28th and 29th of April. And one of them sent the most zinger of an email to all the others. This is, this, right? Without having, a conflict coach right alongside of her, and was searing, seething. And so two are like, we are not even going to come back to this, and that was the first reason why they couldn't get together in the first place. So after about 3 or 4 months of that kind of work, it just all blew up. That was the email I had yesterday. What's most upsetting to me about that, I'm the neutral, but is the loss of what I know they have the capacity to do. They have the chance to come together with that kind of hostility and actually do something about it. So what about for you? Think of something that's serious for you, at work or at home, and answer those 2 questions. And have fun. I did mention that I do have this beautiful bell. I'm going to share with you, I'm a Catholic girl by background, and I didn't know that there were Buddhist nuns until a beautiful Buddhist nun gave me this chime about over a decade ago. She said I needed it, and what I've come to find about this chime, do any of you, do you do yoga or martial arts and things like that? Well, you're familiar with chimes, or facilitated meetings. You might be familiar with chimes. This particular one, it's actually a tonality that opens up this chakra of the body. If you're interested in ancient and tribal wisdom, as I am, very much so in the arena of conflict, it's only when we have an emotional experience that we remember something. So I will ding this beautiful sound, and you can pause. And in that moment, as adults, this is also a part of andragogy and how of teaching and training adults, you and I have a much better chance of retaining what it was that you were just experiencing. So, find a partner. You'll each have about 3 or 4 minutes. I will keep track of time, part of the spa day. Decide who speaks first, and I'll remind you about answering these 2 questions. Come on back. Welcome back. Welcome back. That's right. I just feel the difference of being excited and then settling again. Just notice what just happened and the difference that it takes and that you're aware of in your body, right? As well as in your head and maybe in your heart. Let's take a look at this very briefly. But what is it for some of you, anyone who's willing, that's most upsetting or disturbing to you about those conflicts?
Lack of communication.
And the failed communication?
Yeah, I said lack of communication.
Lack of communication.
Yes.
What's most upsetting to you about the lack of communication?
I don't know what's going on.
All right, so I don't know what's going on. Now we're getting someplace, right? We have these fancy euphemisms like, yeah, it's a failure to communicate. What's really upsetting about that? I don't know what's going on. And when I don't know what's going on,
I can't do anything about it.
and when I can't do anything about it,
I feel like I'm out of control.
I feel like I'm out of control, right? So that equals I feel out of control. All
I'm
right.
going to choke somebody.
All right. And I might act on that and hurt somebody and choke them. See what we just did? See, there's a difference, right? Some of the literature would just simply say, oh yeah, it was a failure to communicate. But if we really want to be on the cutting edge of conflict and conflict transformation, this is what matters. Let's take a couple more. Yes?
What was most upsetting is that it was a violation of ethics.
So a violation of ethics. And when there is or was a violation of ethics, what was most upsetting to you about that?
It made the situation unfair. It was
Okay.
supposed to be a fair issue, and it became unfair.
Okay? So the situation is unclear. And when the unfair. What happens when the situation is unfair for you that's most upsetting?
What's most upsetting is that there are character flaws I decided to aware of. So I became aware of significant character flaws of people I knew and thought I could trust.
So when you became aware of significant character flaws in others or in yourself?
In others.
In others.
Oh,
So
I'm flawed.
when you become aware of those significant character flaws in others, what's most upsetting to you about that?
They can't be trusted.
That I can't trust the other person, right? See how we just went, right? I feel I can't trust the other, right? And that would have been labeled, it was an ethical violation, right? Or it was unfair. But really down underneath it is, now I can't trust them. And if you really go a little deeper, other people on whom you relied and who made the decision, right? My own judgment, right? So maybe I also can't trust my own judgment, right? Yeah. So we really, in a very quick, short period of time, have this amazing ability to be able to reflect back and draw an insight. And by the way, we're the only species on the planet that we know of, at least as of yet, or in the stratosphere, that has this ability to be able to reflect back and to draw forth an insight. It's one of the pieces that does distinguish us from the animal kingdom. What else was most upsetting or disturbing? Yes?
I'm afraid I won't get what I want.
Right? So when I'm afraid I won't get what I want, what's upsetting about that?
Because if I don't get what I want, I might get to more of a core of I'm being perceived as, or I'm not feeling like I get what I need, or I'm not, like, continue to go down issues of deeper stuff.
Yeah, it can touch on some deeper stuff.
I don't feel loved. Or
I don't feel loved. Let's go right there. If I don't get what I want from somebody else, I have this feeling I feel unloved. How many of us want to be loved and approved of, right? Yeah, it's a motivation that comes out of the 3 centers of intelligence, and I'll say something about that. Absolutely. Let's take 1 or 2 more. The most upsetting experience for you in the conflict.
Where someone blew up at me and I didn't like the way I reacted to her.
So the other blew up, and I didn't like my reaction. Why? What was most upsetting for you about that
Well, I can
reaction?
go back to the first one and say I felt out of control, but
Mhm.
I also, it just made me feel very weak.
Yeah, right.
I felt weak.
Felt weak. Thank you. One more.
What was most disturbing was I felt that he had dug in his heels with his position.
So, and the he means of the other. So the other digs in his heels. And what's upsetting for you when the other digs in his heels?
I feel there's no room for discussion. It's like it shuts off any discussion.
Right? So what happens when discussion is shut off that's most upsetting to you?
Probably the first. I feel out of control. Feel like I have no chance of getting what I want.
So discussion shut off, and then I go back up here where I can, like others, feel out of control.
I feel like I won't get.
And like I then
don't
won't
have a
get what I
chance.
want, and therefore I might not be loved, etc., or whatever it is that's underlying that for you. Absolutely. Therein is a cycle.
Just bring up one that isn't up there.
Yes.
What I felt like that conflict is, it's a time suck.
Yeah.
Sucks your energy.
Yes. Yes. Absolutely. So what is it that's most upsetting about the time suck when it takes your energy? What's most upsetting about that?
That I could have been spending it in another way that was better, more productive. It was, so it takes hours sometimes.
It's, yeah, hours, days, and months.
I sent out the email that could have been a nice phone call. Why did you need to do that email? You've all.
So there's a certain, like this dread of, here we go, I'm going to have something taken from me when I could be doing something else that's more productive.
Right.
Yeah, okay. So when you are not able to do something that is more productive, what is most upsetting about that?
I could have been out at the birthday party
Right.
last night instead I was home reading emails and responding.
So it causes me, right, my anger at them.
Right, it reorganizes your priorities.
Yep. In a way that you didn't have control over. Yeah, so we come right back then to here. So, and the piece about I could, strangle someone is in the same camp, right? So we all get that, right? Just like I thought I was going to do that with two of my sons. But you'll also see that my anger at the other person, right? The other person not communicating with me. So now I feel out of control because they made me feel out of control, right? They're doing something that I think is unfair. I've discovered this. I can't trust them. See, it's like as plain as the nose on our faces. I'm afraid I won't get what I want from the other. And then the other won't love me. Right? The other blows up and I react. I feel weak in their eyes. The other digs in his heels, shuts off discussion. I'm out of control with him. Situation. See the self and other piece? Remember that worldview? If you're willing to try it on like a new set of clothes today, that in conflict, if we take a worldview that is about self and other, we have a much greater chance of being able to deal with those conflicts in ways that we're not avoiding and mishandling. And this is why with that dynamic. And you'll be happy to know, maybe, or maybe not, this is so supported now by a lot of research scholars that have gone into taking a look at this because we didn't want to just simply go out and think we had just another good idea. So, it's not the conflict. It's not the ethical violation. It wasn't that he just didn't send me the information, or it wasn't that, the other did something and whatever the cause of the blow up was, or whatever the digging in the heels was about, the budget wasn't passed appropriately, or there was a mistake. You can add all kinds of that. It's not about that. It's about the conflicting. It's the way we interact that's the most upsetting and the most disturbing to us. It seems very, very elementary when we can look at it this way, but it's quite profound. It's the main barrier. It's the main barrier in negotiation, and it's the main barrier in our daily interactions. So here's the theory. Conflict destabilizes our brains. I've been studying, I've had the great privilege of studying now for about the past 6 years with a number of neurosciences and attending those conferences with them and learning as much as I can about what they're talking about and how it relates to the conflict experience. And what we know is that when we are unprepared, we experience a vulnerability and a sense of self-absorption that just comes over us, right? It just sort of happens. Now, when we're prepared, we don't experience that, so you can be managing and dealing with conflict, but you're on it. It's when it comes your way and you have that feeling that you're out of control. That's the kind of conflict that we're talking about. We literally lose oxygen to our brains. And we slip out of gear because our prefrontal cortex, we have a 3-part brain. Up here is our prefrontal. We have our limbic brain, which is our emotional. We have our brainstem right down here. And all of our thinking, our rationalization, our analysis, our consequential thinking is up here in the prefrontal, right? You know this, maybe you know this. In conflict, we slip out of gear in a nanosecond. And it's very interesting, there's a difference for women and for men, or we might say for females and for males, because we can see it in very young children. Females, well, I'll tell you about the male part first. Males slip past the limbic brain, the emotional brain, and go right down to the brainstem. And in the brainstem is what we would have known for many years as fight or flight, right? Right? You can think, all of you have little boys or now grown men as children. They're going to go hit each other, they're going to kick something, they're going to throw something, whatever. That went right down to the brainstem. But what we now know about the past 5 years is that there's another response. So fight, flight, freeze, and just in the last 3 months unveiled at a conference in Washington, D.C., is faint. They've been studying faint in the animal kingdom and looking at how we have missed something as human beings. You know that. Collapse. Right? Yes. It's the one that happens most often for women. After we've been circling around in the limbic brain. So as little girls in conflict, we go to our limbic brain, which is our emotional brain. And that's why there is so much emotional flooding. We're wired that way. But guess what? It's an awesome way to be wired. Because what we also know, regardless of gender, regardless of culture also, that 80% of decisions that are important have to pass through the limbic brain. That little chime is a good example of that. You know this intuitively. It's our egos that get in the way. So we like to say we take a not counterintuitive approach to conflict, we take a counter-egoic approach to conflict because it's actually very intuitive what we already know how to do. This is like air for you. You know how to do this and you know what this is about. So remembering that it destabilizes the brain, conflict, that little snarky beast, and we do not operate optimally. So, voila, we do have these 3 wonderful centers of intelligence. It's ancient wisdom. We pull it forth this year, today. You know in conflict when you get fuzzy, right? Or, maybe it's a deer in the headlights. Whatever the experience is, you also know that's your head center. And your thinking goes askew. You also have a heart response. Maybe it's the flutter of the heart. Maybe you feel like your heart just sunk. Maybe you well up with tears. Maybe you do a number of things that are emotional. You also have, and it's very, very underestimated, and not much has been taught about it in Western society, you have a somatic response, your body center of intelligence. This is what Eastern cultures have known for centuries and centuries. So if we take these 3 centers of intelligence, and certainly this is just a naming of them today. We couldn't do the training in them, but we need to name them. We can then go back and take a look at this interaction. What conflict causes us to do, that destabilization of the brain, right? Our 3 centers of intelligence get cattywampus, and our interaction degenerates in seconds. So the experience of being unprepared and unaware, vulnerable, and self-absorbed looks like what we call relative weakness. We say relative because we'll see in what we also have the ability to do. But in those conflicts, when you experienced confusion, you were uncertain, you were surprised, you had this discovery, oh my goodness, you felt vulnerable, you felt powerless, right? All those feelings of being out of control. You were indecisive, what to do now? What are they going to do? You have a lack of confidence when 2 minutes ago or 2 hours ago or 2 days ago, you were on top of the world. And you experience self-doubt. It's human. And we all do it in the serious conflicts in a matter of seconds. Coupled with that, because we're on 2 trajectories in conflict, we have an experience of self-absorption. And self-absorption is that experience when we feel like we need to defend ourselves, right? Because the other is doing us wrong. And it can be I want to strangle him, right? It can be I want to kill him. But it's an aspect of self-protection and hostility. It also has this quality, especially in your conversations that turn into confrontations, where there's a great deal of suspicion, right? What are they not telling you, right? What's really going on behind the scenes? What do I have to do now with all that time that's going to be sucked out of my life that I had planned? And what happens is closed-mindedness. So indeed, it does get shut off, the interaction. So we know interaction degenerates, but the amazing part in this cycle is in our weakness and our self-absorption. We can have an interaction that was okay and all of a sudden becomes a little negative. And your centers of intelligence, if you tune into them, are going to tell you that's happening. You're going to know much more often that something is bubbling. Maybe somebody whom you have a lot of interaction with, also you just don't for a little while. But that negativity can become quite destructive and then alienating and certainly demonizing in a matter of moments. We call it sort of this idea of, or you'll hear people say, yeah, it went south fast, right? Oh, it's in the basement. It's too late. It's too bad to deal with. It's not worth it. That's when you know that you are in the alienating and demonizing aspect of conflict. And it can happen very quickly. It could also last for decades. If we look at generational conflict and multifamilies who've owned businesses and so forth, we experience this. What I want to share with you is that when we become alienated from others because they've done us wrong, we actually are more alienated from ourselves because we are not operating optimally. And we're oftentimes not operating in conformity with that value system that we hold near and true and deeply. And the reciprocal aspect of conflict is that the other person is experiencing the same thing. Now, they might be blowing up at you and you're holding down the fort. It's the same energy. It just manifests itself differently. So we could also say that conflict gets pretty spun up. So whether it's going south or whether it's getting spun up, it has the same quality. But people have this amazing ability, you and I, to actually regenerate. We're resilient. Even as the conflict unfolds, in the meeting, if they had the trust with each other to even open up the conflict, and there may have been a little rumble, or maybe as a chapter fair, you're thinking, oh my gosh, how am I going to work with this one? There's a confidence that you can take on that people do, and it's a truism, have the ability to rebound and to become quite resilient when given the right kind of response. So that's what we're interested in looking at today. So if you want to know the technology behind it, the state-of-the-art terms and conflict transformation, you're actually fostering empowerment shifts and recognition shifts. And the empowerment shift is simply that moving from when you're feeling unsettled or out of control to feeling a little bit more grounded, a little bit calmer, a little bit clearer, you're unsure, a little bit more decisive. That is an empowerment shift that we know happens in just seconds in conflict, and then there's also a recognition shift. And the recognition shift is when you had been defensive and wanting to, chop someone's head off, to where you become a little bit more open to their experience. You do not have to agree with them. You do not have to think they're a good person. You do not have to respect them. But you can become a little bit more open to them. So if we take these two shifts and we go back to weakness and self-absorption that takes us to the basement, or takes us south, and we have an empowerment and a recognition shift, we ourselves and the other person can experience a personal strength of self and a responsiveness to other. And it doesn't have anything to do with having to give up anything that is near and dear to you, except possibly a bit of pride. Because our egos are really, really driven by this belief in our lower brainstem that we need to protect ourselves when someone has harmed us. And that's why self-awareness is so important. You don't have to be so hard on yourself because your body's working, right? Your brain's working. In fact, it's working just fine. It's just that you want to be on a higher evolutionary scale without having to be so impulsive, which comes from the animal kingdom. And we have the ability to do so. So, it's not the conflict itself. It's the way we conflict. We know that it destabilizes. It also causes, most importantly, a fracture in our interactions. And when the fractures occur, that's when we have factions that happen, we have cliques, we know all of that. So here's the pièce de résistance for this morning. Instead of focusing on the problem, what if we focused on the interaction? Yeah, right? The very thing that was giving you angst, to focus on that. And how might we do that? Well, the most common mishandled conflict in our workplace is the triangle. And so to take a look at the triangle, we know that, if we just played it out today, A and B can have a conflict, and basically they come, in this case, to you, right? You're going to be the C this morning, but we know we can be in all of those situations. When you are C, will you align with the complainer? And we say complainer. It could be somebody whom you highly respect, and they're saying, for instance, we're working with a senator and a lot of properties and families and so forth, and you might say, I can't get anything done because all those AHs, back at the house and blah, blah, blah. So I could align with how I know it is a real problem in the U.S. Did I do anything in that conflict interaction that actually is transforming? No, I didn't. So I aligned. We don't have to, though. But another common way that triangles are responded to is we defend. I could have said, oh, come on, it's really not that bad. Look how great you are. And how about if there are just more of those other people? I know they're there, right? Kind of like that, oh, everything's going to be fine kind of an approach. Or I could have dismissed him and defended others. Well, Senator, you don't have a very good track record yourself. But I do know some others who do. I could have done something like that. Or I could have been more subtle. Could have said, yeah, I know it's hard, but you haven't had a great track record either. There are some who have, and maybe they would be worth talking with. I could do it in a more subtle kind of way, but nonetheless, I am defending the person complained about. Or why don't you just try and stay out of it? Someone comes and you think, say nothing, right? See no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil. It's also another approach. We'd like to share with you, however, that you can be relational by focusing on the interaction. What does it look like? Well, if someone comes to you with a complaint, of course you want to have that self-awareness. You know it's a problem because something in your body, something in your emotional system, something in your head is telling you, ding, ding, right? I was feeling just fine a moment ago, and now I'm a little fluttered. Something's happening. So self-awareness. Stay grounded by breathing and stay centered because your response is critical, and this is what it can look like. A has a problem with B. And where is Susan? Is she still here in the room? Right here? Okay, great. All right, so Susan, let's just say that you are coming to me with a problem about B. Let's just go ahead and do it.
All right.
Yeah, just play it.
According to my long-studied method acting skill.
Doesn't have to be scripted.
All right, so on the months heading up to the WPO conference, person A and person B were going to room together.
Oh.
And it was great, and
Oh,
they were making all these arrangements about working.
Are these two members in your chapter?
Well, they're chapter chairs.
Oh, they're chapter
They're
chairs.
chapter chairs. I'm only in charge of the good people in the WPO.
So two chapter, okay, yeah.
And so they were going to room together. And I guess they made all kinds of arrangements and so on and so forth. And then at the last minute, one of them pulled out, said, hey, I want my own private room. Or I'm going to stay with a.
You know what? We had the exact same thing happen in my chapter. There were a couple people. They were all rooming together. The chair sent out, a message that said it'd be a good thing to room together. They were. And then someone says, "Oh, we can't come because somebody else is coming." And we had someone like left high and dry because they're supposed to be rooming together. The idea is to have collaboration, get to know each other better. I know.
But, well, I'm not going to get involved because, it's.
Well, let me tell you what I did. I did, I sent them a good email. I'm like, who the heck do you think you are? And I bet I know who you're talking about, too, because I've heard a little bit of that, right? Yes. So pause. What is my response to Susan? Susan is coming to me. She has a complaint about two other chapter chairs, right? And what do I do? I'm aligning, absolutely. And what else am I doing? I took away, exactly, her what?
You took away her issue. She was sharing with
I
you.
completely took away her issue. It's crazy. So here's this boulder, basically, that Susan has, or that she heard about with these other two chapter chairs. So this would be our barrier, right? And she comes to Louise. So I'm C, and if I were to map it right here, this is, sometimes red you can't see. So here's Susan. Here's her problem with B, and these could be just the other chairs, right? Chapter chairs. And she comes to C, Louise. Now, the crazy part about this is that here is this boulder, and Susan and I have a fine relationship, right? But I align with her, and it's crazy because we didn't need to have that sort of thickness and coziness. We were fine, just the way we were. But I add to it. So in aligning, align with, and sometimes there isn't an add to, this relationship actually looks like it gets stronger. Right? You know this when you were in 5th grade, you perfected it on the playground. Right? And think back, because you know then what happened to this little coalition right here over time. Then somebody else might say something to Louise about Susan, and I'm going to get cozy with them. So this becomes pretty flimsy over time, even though it felt real cozy when Susan came to me and I could say, oh yeah, let me tell you my stuff too. Now from a conflict transformation or even resolution standpoint, as you exactly expressed, or there you are, this boulder up here, what happens to it? Nothing. Exactly. Why does she need to go address that? She may even think about that. She might, I could tell her how to do this. But she doesn't pay attention to that. She's got Louise right here. Right? This is how coalitions are formed. And I'll also show you how they get out of control. So when we align with and add to, got that line. It gets a little shaky, right? So this relationship that was fine, I actually weakened it. I weakened it by my response.
Susan would figure that out in 2 seconds.
She may.
So she'd get rid of you. I mean, you know,
I-
it's not working, this is now someone I can go to.
I want to actually go back to that because think about the conflict experience, right? When you feel out of control and I actually align with her. So it would be something where like, oh, I know, Susan, listen, yeah, you know, you're thinking that you don't want to go say anything to them. I wouldn't say anything to them either. You know, I agree with that. I just agree with her.
Or she may
So?
write the scathing email like you did, which will come back.
Or she may, and then it goes elsewhere, doesn't it?
Right.
So let's also add this align with, add to, and also agree with. So Susan and I feel actually pretty good with each other in that way. But you're right if we go to the next scenario when I add and do something else. But I want to pause. You have and I have a tendency at times, because it's human, to join with other people in opposition to a third party, right? It's an unhealthy way to build coalitions. We certainly know about this. This is how the Democrats and the Republicans go about business, and especially as we gear up to election years. And I love politics, so it's interesting to watch. It's also painful. We know that it's a way to gain power, to become closer to someone. Or I could say, oh, come on, Susan, or do it my way. Or, you know, I agree with you. I wouldn't go talk to him either. Again, in opposition to whom? In this case, to the other two chapter chairs. And we know that it's actually easy. And it's especially easy if you have the idea of building, right, momentum, or if you're part of regular sort of grist in the rumor mill. We know that it demonizes these people over here, and we know it creates camps and sides, but we also know that it's especially a trap if you are, or consider yourself to be an agreeable person, a peaceful person, someone who's non-confrontational or conflict avoidant, and you might like the complaining person, right? Your relationship's fine. Your relationship actually might even be really near and dear to you. And you also want to be liked and approved of. That's why triangling, destructive triangling, also happens in ways that we just did not foresee the consequences. Because a number of these motivations are good motivations. They're very relational motivations. They're not just feminine motivations, although as women, because of our limbic brain, we go there often. But there is another way to respond. So, Susan, same scenario. Just come to me complaining about the other two. Exact same thing.
Well, you know who is once again has bailed on
What do you mean you know who?
Sarah.
Sarah?
She's kind of flaky, and she could get into rooming with someone, and then she decided she wasn't going to, and so the other person's left holding the deposit. It's very expensive.
I know, but come on, Susan.
Sarah's
I mean,
just really.
you don't know what happened in Sarah's life. It could have been something that was really important or something that was an emergency. I mean, come on. Who are you to say? I mean, I know you've been overworked just getting this conference together. Right? What just happened in that same scenario, but what did I do this time?
You defended C.
I defended C. I came right, or actually I am C. I defended the chapter chairs, or in this case, Sarah, right? Right away. So I defended, so let's get that up here. And then what else did I do? I did. I dismissed Susan, and I defended B. I really did. I dismissed and really belittled, and in the belittling, it may have been an experience of belittling her, right? Even in a way that was, oh, I know you've been working so hard. It's kind of like that, oh, take a chill pill, or maybe you should go on vacation, or maybe you should pray about it. All those kinds of things, right? Right, it's just your hormones. Is it that time of the month again? I know it's the menopause thing. We have all these feminine ways that others will do this to us as well. Here's what happens. So there was a problem here that Susan had with the chair. In this case, we'll say it was Sarah. what happens when she comes to Louise and I dismiss and defend? What happens to that problem up here? Nothing, or it gets worse. Who said it gets worse? Yes, why does it get worse?
Because you're not responding in a way that will, in the end, resolve any of this. If someone comes to you, your responsibility as a friend is to think on another level.
So,
And to help that friend, see it in a kind, gentle.
so that would be the ideal, wouldn't it? But in this case, it got worse because before, Susan doesn't need to. She's got Louise by her side. I'm with you, girl. Yeah, it's a headache when this happens. But now, I have ganged up on Susan, so is there another conflict?
Yes.
Yes, and where is that one? Yes, I've created now a conflict between Susan and me, and this conflict gets worse because the idea of Susan being able to go work on this when I've just defended them, she's feeling even weaker, right? And this is what it looks like. And you want to play with me here? Go talk to other people in this audience about what just happened here. And I'm going to go talk to people about what just happened too. So, does Susan, since you've been here at the conference, have you heard Susan complaining about people who were, canceling their room reservations? I mean, have you heard Susan say that? I mean, and you know what? I think, right, Mary, you were going to have your husband come, and you were thinking about canceling and so forth. I mean, what's the big deal? You heard Susan saying that? Susan, you can go do the same thing. Go talk about Louise. Right? Because this is what happens. Susan's like, I got a problem with Louise.
All that I do behind the scenes.
So I'm going to go.
Unbelievable.
What, did Susan come like that's so much fun. Right? I mean, and was Susan talking to you about me? And what did she say? Because I do want to get that is familiar, right? So here's Louise. Louise goes out. So I go out and there's Susan. She's still at it. Come on back up, my friend. I go to N and O and P, and I might even go find Q over there. And maybe I went to R, and R's kind of like, leave me out of it, right? And Susan over here, Susan is finding her other girlfriend, and she's going, to S and Y, and so it just so happens that they kind of have something in common here, and she's got X and Z over here, and then she's coming over here maybe to a G, and she's got a little bit of H and I, they're always together, and then Louise crosses over and wants to know, what has she said to S and to X and to H and I, and H and I are like, well, I don't know, but they go, did you hear what Louise said? And this is what it begins to look
Never
like.
happens in your chat.
Oh, please. And that part about who's for Susan is an absolute expected outcome. So you tend to have then this coalition building will form camps, and they tend, when your organization is in a dangerous place from a conflict standpoint, when the camps have almost like metastasized. You know that no matter what, N, O, and P are always going to be together. And you know that R is always going to have her head in the sand and not ever want to have anything to do with it. And you know that X and Z and S and Y, they're always going to have the same kind of response too, as opposed to something that's a little bit more dynamic, right? So this is, and then we'll get to that with a question. I just want to finish this little piece. Oh, you probably have a question right on this. Go ahead.
What happens when it's a true grit situation? And I think we deal with them a lot.
True grit.
It's the true grit. We're the chapter chair in the middle of conflict.
Yes.
We have this innate or natural, you mentioned about the sensitivity and the caring. We have it because we want our groups to be strong. But you have two people that have very definite and probably valid points of view. That's the kind of conflict that's really difficult to separate because they're both looking to you to be the one that's in their camp.
They're looking to you to be like a little mediator.
That's exactly what they are.
That's exactly what they're looking for. Yeah. So what to do? There are responses. I'll share them with you. So the question is, what do you do when you, as the chapter chair, are in the position of C, but they're each coming to you complaining about the other? And you see that they both have very legitimate concerns. How to deal with that? I said, yes, you're in the role of being what I call the little M, the little mediator. Right? The only thing different is that I have to maintain my neutrality as a matter of profession, and I have a code of ethics on confidentiality that others who are not professional mediators wouldn't have. But in the moment, the skill set is the same. So let's take a look at that. First of all, when we dismiss or defend, we know it creates another conflict, bolder. We also know that when we dismiss and defend, there's a lot of gossip and factors in the group, and they tend to look like this, right? Spaghetti. And we also know that it is especially a trap if you are someone who goes to dismiss or defend. It's especially a trap for you when you are a direct, no-nonsense kind of person. It's also especially a trap for you when you consider yourself strong and you're oriented to social justice principles, or you might not like the complaining person to start with, or you want to be in control. So that's oftentimes what happens, and this is the consequence, typically, of that in some way, shape, or form. So,
Louise, I
there,
have an observation. So, with the scenario that we witnessed, there's an immediate assumption that, in this case, you didn't even ask why she was coming to you.
that's right. I went really
You
quickly,
went right into
impulsively.
assuming, that
I
there
did.
was a role you needed to play, as opposed to maybe she just wants to process.
It's a wonderful observation. The reason for that, you all know. Conflict destabilizes, right? So now, when I'm C, having this come to me without self-awareness, without a decision being clear that I will not engage in triangling, I myself get sucked into that triangle because of my own sense of weakness and vulnerability. And that's exactly why it happens. It's human, but we can remedy that with self-awareness, understanding of this principle, and some skill set to exactly what you were talking about. So practically speaking, what happens when people go elsewhere is exactly why A came to C in the first place. Because we're weak in conflict, we're seeking others to have alignment with us. We're looking for support. We tend to get the wrong kind of support, and we tend to give the wrong kind of support. Not because we're bad people, though. The brain gets wired that way because we also chunk information, which is why we also move quickly. It's something familiar. We move really quickly to fix, to solve, tell other people what we think we should do, and that's exactly what we want to not do. So we could stay out. It's actually not so bad to stay out of a triangle. But the issue is if you stay out of it long term, that you'll tend to get lumped in, especially as chapter chairs. If you don't do something with the points of view that if you felt they were both valid, that's one scenario. But if you thought somebody else was wrong, right, or you need to act on that, which I bet you do more oft times, right, than not, you can't sit idly for too long. It's okay to stay out for a while. There's actually some job security in that, so you don't get in this fray. But you'll need to respond because they're going to go elsewhere looking for alignment. So instead, there is a way to respond cumulatively. And you probably do some of this in your chair meetings already, I bet, if not a lot of the time. People have the kind of trust where they can raise issues. So A has a problem with B. We're going to do it one last time. And the beauty of this one is, this is a way for you to consider how to respond that is relational. It's grounded, centered, and it offers a relational response. So Susan, if you could do that. Susan, is there something that you want to talk about?
Oh, yes, once again, this problematic chapter chair, Sarah, is causing problems like canceling a room, and the other chapter chair is really upset.
Oh, wow. So the problematic is sort of, once again, the problematic chapter chair has canceled, and the other chapter chair is upset about it?
And I don't know what to do because, I have to at least appear to be in control.
Oh, right. Yeah, no, it's hard. You don't know what to do, especially when you have to appear to be neutral. At least appear.
Here, at least. But, what do you think I should do? I mean, I'm very conflict avoidant, you know that. I'm great with my head in the sand.
So you're kind of wondering what, see if I can speak
Putting
loud.
my head in the sand.
So you're wondering what it is that, so you're wondering what it is that you should do, especially when you're
Yes,
conflict
and
avoidant.
Sarah, I know it's all Sarah.
And you do, you're pretty sure it's all Sarah. Pretty sure it's all Sarah?
I am. I mean, she's always causing some kind of ruckus.
So Sarah, that's the one you said is sort of like the problematic chapter chair. She's a pain and she always is.
There's always something.
And you're kind of wondering what to do about that, especially when you're conflict avoidant.
Right. I mean, you know Sarah. She's, you know her. I mean,
I do know Sarah. It sounds like the issue for you is like, how do you want to get some clarity on handling it, what you're going to do?
well, I think I'll tell Sarah that, you know, she should just pay the money, and if she doesn't take the room, she owes her the money.
So you're thinking about just telling Sarah directly.
Right, right.
Sarah,
know,
you
this
should
is-
go ahead and take the money or cancel the room.
No, I think she should pay her share.
Oh, pay her share. Yeah, pay her share. Okay. You feel strongly about that?
No, I mean, I don't want to. I not only have my head in the sand, I'm very wishy-washy. So, it's Sarah who brings this out in me. I mean, she just sets me on edge.
So there's something around your wishy-washiness that comes out with Sarah that brings out something in you.
Well, there are probably other time or two that I've been wishy-washy.
Just a time or two.
Maybe. Not lately, of
So
course.
not lately, but really just with Sarah. So you're thinking that maybe you'll talk to her directly.
Well, I guess I could.
I don't know if you want to.
I mean, you're a conflict mediator. Maybe you could help me script it out.
Well, as chapter chair, I'm you right now. If that would be helpful for me to work with you on scripting it out as you talk to Sarah, is that something that you're asking me to do?
I would very much appreciate that, yes.
Okay.
Especially if it happens at 8 o'clock, or would you prefer 9 o'clock?
Okay. So I would be happy to meet when it was good for you.
Oh, thank you. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. All right. So what did you see? So there's a problem that Susan had with Sarah. She comes to Louise again, right? Because I'm either in role, right? I'm you as chapter chair, or we already have a relationship of another variety. So this is strong. Why would she be coming to me if it weren't? And how did I choose to respond this time?
You simply reflected, you didn't add anything to it. You repeated in a very kind way and understanding, and it was really wanting to understand her perspective.
It was that simple, just reflecting back and wanting to understand her perspective. It had this empathic kindness to it. What else did you see?
For the first time, I heard you listen.
There you go. Yeah, for the first time, that didn't jump so quickly, right? I took a pause and just took in some oxygen, right? So I can get grounded. And then I was able to listen more fully to Susan. Did it cost me anything to do that? No. Did it take a little time? Yes. Did it take a little longer time than the other two responses? It did. If we were to have, if I put on a stopwatch, that may have taken about 2 minutes rather than the other that took maybe about 30 seconds. Right? So what else?
I was just going to say, it didn't take 30 seconds because look at all that happened. That's like hours. And hours.
Exactly.
It has a
So
life
our
that goes
quick
beyond.
responses,
Not,
and you know, some of this can last years,
Yeah.
right? We know that, don't we? I know that as a professional mediator, you know, having to sort of untangle the web of years of where something went like
It's
wildfire.
kind of like the preventative model that you take time now to prevent.
There you have it, a very preventative model.
But to avoid the time, and that has taken time, I'm still struggling to understand why Susan came to you. Would it not be better to get Sarah and the other chapter chair together?
Sure.
And
You could have, that would be another response that a chapter chair could do. You basically would have a mediation, right, between the two. It would be a fabulous tool to use.
so wouldn't that be cutting out all the pre-stuff? Because then you would
Sure,
have to say,
absolutely. The piece, though, is more on the spot in the moment. you actually have an ability to take care of that in a way that didn't even involve the orchestration of trying to get everybody together and then to hear both of them and to have that kind of a meeting. You have a much greater chance on the spot when someone comes to empower them to decide how they want to be able to deal with it. In this case, Susan got pretty clear, even with all the mention of being conflict avoidant and a bit wishy-washy, but only it's Sarah that brings this out in her. She's not only like that maybe a couple other times. And then, well, maybe you could help me script it, right? Am I going to script it for her? No, just be there like, is that something that you want to say? And what might that have a consequence of? Is that really what you mean? So I did one other thing. In addition to listening and reflecting,
you empowered her. You recognized she knew what she should do and had to do.
I had a belief system. I believed in her capacity, and there was a skill, a third skill in there.
You tested, you had some testing to it. You feel strongly about that.
Okay, that would be the reflection. That's a reflection.
But it also was really testing of some
Had a
sense of
tentative
where
tone at the end, didn't it? It was like a
Just
question.
where is she?
Yeah,
Is she
like a
really-
testing.
Yeah.
Yeah, what's important for her?
Yeah.
Is that where she is now? Kind of this maybe, maybe not quality. Absolutely. And the skill?
I was just going to say, you created space for her to start doing her own thinking.
Precisely. Remember, the brain shuts down. We don't get oxygen to it. So the mere listening and offering reflection provides oxygen for Susan, and with the belief that she's got the capacity to figure this out. I don't have to do or tell or fix or do anything. She's going to be able to it. She still owns it.
Desensitized her and brought her down.
It absolutely destabilized or stabilized her from a destabilized position. And what else did you see?
capable of solving things.
I really believed her to be very capable of it. And indeed, that's the worldview. That's a relational worldview. People are capable, even if they are problematic or problem children or difficult or off the chart, etc. They're still capable in that moment. Maybe not the way you would have done it or the full gamut, but incrementally they are. Last piece.
It feels to me like it's still triangulating because as soon as you align with Susan to help her with that script,
Yeah.
then the other person will know that you were still helping her through. So I don't see that that was a resolution.
It's a wonderful comment because if you had, I did not have that, my centers of intelligence were not firing off for me in that way, but if yours were, then there's another piece of work to do, right? So Susan, I'd be happy to do that, whatever the time that's convenient for you. Now I just want to say, as your chapter chair, I want to be able to, I even use the language, I want to be able to empower you in this decision that you've made. I still have an obligation and a duty to, we'll give rent to Judy, and I would hope that this would help the two of you. So I just want to be clear about that. I don't want you to think that I'm, I would just simply say, I don't want you to think I'm aligned with you. I want to be supportive. I want to be supportive of both of you. If this is something that you think would be helpful, I'd be willing to do that. That's an aspect of conflict transformation coaching that we do all the time for executives and helping them to also see where they need to go with other people. We might be coaching the other people too. So you're in that role, you're in my role all the time on a daily basis with your membership in that way. So you'd follow your intuition. That's what I want you to know. If you had that feeling somewhere, follow it and take care of it in good process. Good. So here, when you offer a relational response, you actually have a unitive outcome. Because this conflict between Susan and Sarah, what happens to it? What happens when I respond by listening, reflecting, and asking open questions, that sort of reality checking? What happens to that conflict? Yeah, she's looking right at it, right? It's amazing that it actually contains, if I had another marker here, maybe I do. Here. It contains the conflict right here. Whether you would have a little mediation about it, that might be something that was, much larger. You can do that too. But in the moment, you have the ability to empower and to offer supportive responses for both. And the reason why it's unitive is because when your other member, and we called her Judy, I called her Judy, I think. When Judy learns that A wants to talk with her, and she had talked to the chapter chair, and you say, yeah, I really encourage you both to talk with each other because I want you all to work it out. I know you both have points of view that are important for you, and I want to be supportive. I actually helped Susan with what she wanted to say to you, and I'm happy to do the same for you, and how it is that you'd like to speak with Susan. You maintain that role. When you do that role, does any of this happen? No. It doesn't, because they know that you are supportive. And from a theory perspective, that's how you do it, right? You're going to pause and breathe. As you all said already, you're making space for awareness. You're going to intentionally avoid the destructive triangle. This is incentive. It's incentive for me in my own organization and in my own family and in board on which I sit. This is a big incentive. And you will absolutely have a little more of that time. So I'll finish this up with a couple slides on how you do it. So you know that you're going to listen and suspend your judgment. And then when you engage, it's exactly that reflecting back. Reflecting back what the speaker said, and that kindness that you picked up on, which is honoring Susan's experience. Right, I went right to, so you're feeling wishy-washy or you're a conflict avoider. I didn't say, oh, Susan, I don't know, you're pretty good with that. I didn't need to do any of that. I just mirrored what she had to say. When you want to know how to do this and practice with this, listening without directive tendencies, that's the key. Because when people come to us, we impulsively, because of the experience of conflict, when our brains slip out of gear and we become destabilized, we move quickly to judge, to fix, to tell, to advise, align with, agree with, defend, dismiss. Those are the things we do when we've slipped out of gear. It's not how you operate on a regular basis, is it? It isn't. I know that, and you know that too. But we can have some compassion for ourselves and compassion for others by slowing it down, listening fully. And here's a slide for you on the reflection. Notice how when I reflected back, I really used Susan's words. I didn't add my own. Mine might have been not as good as hers. Mine may have been better than hers. It's not an issue of better or worse. It's her language. Because what it provides for Susan, if I don't refrain, if I don't make it bigger, or if I don't diminish, she now has oxygen to her brain and can edit, she can amend. Susan may have even said, I'll make this up, but I think this happens for you a lot. Oh, Louise, thanks. I'm just glad that I talked with you. I'm actually okay. You know, now that I think about it, she'd said her blankety blank, there might be a family matter that she wasn't able, that she might not be able to come. And yeah, it may have just happened. I'm actually good. I'm good with it. That's it. That conflict actually may have been dealt with and gone away because you allow her that place of clarity. Right? Again, it gets contained. So the open questions look like this. Reflection plus open question. We call that the transformative two-step. If you could do that, you would be amazed at what will happen. But the questions are the ones that don't seek factual information for your purposes. They call upon the speaker to consider options. So is that what you're thinking about? Kind of that maybe, maybe not. So you were asking about this, or that you thought about that tentatively, right? It wasn't like, wait a second, when did she book her flight, and where is she coming in from? And let me think if I can think, well, who else was involved in this? Those would be all the kinds of questions Louise would have, right? But if you stick just with her, what you'll find, is there anything else you want to say, right? Anything else you want to tell me? Anything else, any other way I can be helpful? Is there something you're considering? You saw how quickly, it was totally unscripted. You saw how, because it was fun, like just go off script. You saw how quickly Susan turned the corner. Remember that chart on empowerment and recognition? She turned the corner, and what was negative became a little more positive. She gained some personal strength, so she became no longer alienated from herself, but connected to herself and what she thought she needed or wanted to do. And then the situation is much more humanized now. Humanized because now she's even willing to go and talk with, in this case, Sarah. That's huge, even in 3 minutes or 30 minutes compared to all of the rest. So we know it supports empowerment and recognition. We know it also recalibrates our 3 centers of intelligence, our clear thinking, our hearts are not so racing and fluttery, and we have this sense of calm, right? A little bit of relief comes back into the picture. And of course, why do it? Because it stabilizes, as you already said, the person. It also creates this emotional connection that we know is necessary in our work and in our teams. And it is perhaps the only way to create, and the easiest, most free way to create emotional connection. Of course, we see what happens for A, in this case Susan. She's able to think more clearly. And we know what happens to C, to you, in the role that I was in. I'm able to think more clearly without having to race on all the things I'm going to need to do to put this fire out. It prevents destructive triangling by containing the conflict, and it promotes more informed decision making, which is actually an ethical requirement for a professional mediator, to help others make the most informed decision that they can. So when you have a change in the interaction, it can preserve and strengthen your relationship with both of those members of your chapter who were in conflict. And that's a powerful role for a chapter chair to play and to have. We also know in terms of your organization, if you happen or choose to respond relationally, right, by having some self-awareness, grounding yourself, and listening and offering the 2-step, there will be less triangling. There will be less time and money and resources spent. There will be less turnover in terms of your membership. You'll have people who are in for long periods of time. Definitely less stress, more emotional cohesion. And there's a greater amount of respect that we know from the literature and anecdotally that people report. They're so grateful and appreciative and respectful of you when you can respond in this way. And of course you can become, and they can become more engaged, and for all businesses, and you're each running your chapters or your businesses, there's more revenue with also a very fresh kind of branding. So here we go. What are we going to do? We are going to breathe and focus on the interaction. Exactly. It's really hard to focus on the interaction if we don't breathe, right? Because we all get caught up. There's the belief system. Believing in others' capacity. Believing that, this is part of conflict theory, say for another training, but that no human being actually wants to be a victim or a victimizer. We actually know that in terms of our natural, it's called a moral impulse that the scientists actually talk about. We know that we are resilient, and if we believe that there's nothing more important when that phone call comes your way, or that person comes up to you in the hall, or that person pulls you aside before the meeting starts, there's nothing more important than a change in the interaction itself. So there it is. Here's your summary. Be grounded. Pause and breathe. So it's free and it's right there. Be clear. If you could commit to not triangling. Be centered, where you can, from your heart, as you all just noted, listen fully and offer, when you're engaged, a reflection in their words, not yours. And be kind. There's a kindness that is a prerequisite for asking an open question, because otherwise it's not really open. So are you thinking about talking to her by 8 o'clock tomorrow morning? Right? No. So what are you thinking? That's very different. It comes with a generosity, a kindness of spirit. And those ways of being will transform conflict. So be open to what happens. You will be amazed. And you can have the experience of doing that, I'm sure, while we're all here at this conference together. Because triangling is natural, It is expected, but the responses that we have are, we can have a much more elevated response, one that's more in tune with who we really are, one that really calls upon all three centers of our intelligence, and one that transforms. Here are your takeaways. Don't start or join triangles. Remember, what's the most upsetting aspect of the conflict? The interaction, exactly. The relating, the interaction. Choose an intuitive response. You already have it, especially as women. Move towards that conflict and greet it. Not towards it to defend it, and towards it to squash it, and towards it to fight it, but towards it to greet it. Greet the conflict at the door. There's a, I don't know if you like poetry, but Rumi is an amazing poet who's really made a comeback after these hundreds of years. And Rumi talks about greeting those enemies at the door to the house. And the house is you, and the house is me, and how it is that we want to offer that kind of hospitality. You do have some very hard skills. Listening without all the directive tendencies, right? Without having to fix it, you can tell and align and advise. And the two steps, the reflection and the open question. So I wish you all great luck. Be the little M mediators in your chapters and in your lives.